I was kind of picking my brain. I was even late getting Mark the information on what fly I wanted to tie for tonight. The few flies that I fish on a regular basis, I've already done for the club. I have not done just a straight Bunny Leech. The Bunny Leech is by far one of my favorite flies, not only to tie, because it really is such a versatile fly to fish, but the things that you can add onto it, change up with a Bunny Leech, it's endless possibilities of really what you can do with it. Just your straight Bunny Leech is, a zonker strip, a straight cut piece of rabbit fur, very similar to this right here. And what I mean by straight cut, if you're looking at a rabbit's hide, and I actually have a huge piece of it right here. If you're looking at the rabbit's hide, the strips are cut this way, where the fur kind of comes down, and you just lay that over the top of the back of the hook. And then from there, you could add anything you want to it, body-wise. You can do chenille, you can do yarn for the smaller flies, because I'll tie this all the way up to size 10 to 12. Real small stuff for bluegill and small bass and crappie. I'll use even peacock curl just to kind of get those body wraps around the shank of the hook. As for what you can catch on them, it really depends on the size that you tie it. I've tied these as big as size 2, which is very basic. What I'll tie today, and I've gone after. I've actually used those to swing for steelhead and salmon. I've actually tied various versions of it for pike, and everything else we have in our area for warm water. But just to kind of give you an example of the differences that you can do with this, all this right here is just a white rabbit zonker strip in the back, and that easy body material right here that's frayed, and you have yourself a minnow. The eye itself is just thread wraps and eyes glued on, and your a little glue on there to kind of hold it all in place, and you have yourself a very small, pretty awesome minnow imitation right there. Another example of again a different variation of just using a Bunny Leech material is a conehead zonker muddler. So you have your conehead, you have your black rabbit strip here, a lot of flash, even some legs in there with a little bit of a hot spot underneath with that red thread sticking at the bottom. And then you have your deer hair or elk hair up on top to kind of give it a little bit more of a push pull, almost like a Dahlberg diver type, the way it works in the water. Again, different variations. You can really add whatever you want to it. And then here's another example. This is actually one that I tied for the club last year during COVID when we first came back. And I call this the meat and potatoes. This is by far my favorite fly to fish, to tie and everything. Again, just rabbit strip, Magnum. All that means is that it's a little thicker in the cut, and various colors. Very easy to imitate. Some bait fish, if I tie this in white, this is more of a crayfish pattern with a heavy cone on top, and you can just kind of jig it in, and it fishes well, casts well. But the nice things about these is that you could add the weight, you could add a cone head, you can do chain eyes, you can do dumbbell eyes, you could even use those super heavy sculpin heads that they sell, just tied in reverse. And you could even use those plastic heads as well to make it look more like a minnow, or you could just let it be bare. A lot of the smaller ones that I use, because I'm casting those on 3-weight, 4-weight rods, I usually don't put any weight on the top of it. I'll throw a little bit of lead wraps in it up on top just to kind of give it a little bit of weight, but I don't want to make it too heavy and too bulky. For those that have fished, you know, with rabbit strips in the past, you know how heavy that can get. The bigger the fly, the heavier it gets, because that rabbit fur will just soak in that water. But once it really soaks in, it casts super well. It sinks like a rock, and it just allows you to strip that in real nicely. And then as for the body, as I mentioned, you know, you can use the peacock curl. I'll even use, and for you steelhead salmon guys, I'll even use egg yarn right here, which is just a clear white. I'll even use egg yarn and wrap my body for these bigger flies to kind of build up that bulk in various colors. The white I like to use on to coincide with the sculpin heads to kind of really give it that underneath color of the belly. Anyone ever caught a sculpin or some darters? You know, they're usually pretty light colored on the bottom, underneath on their belly side. You know, just kind of matching the hatch type thing with what bait fish you're going for. And then, you know, you could add flash in there. You could add legs in there wherever you want throughout it. You know, like I said, this muzzler right here has both flash, this blue flash, and legs on there. But the nice thing about rabbit is that it just moves so well in the water by itself. You know, you can strip it and it'll move just freely in the water. You can let it pause, and the fur fibers just undulates so well in the water, just always moving. And with all the new technology coming out and fly tying between Game Changers, and you know, you have the little segmented bodies that you can do, and you can make these super light flies that are 12 inches long. They're awesome to tie, but I lose a lot of flies when I fish, and I would be pissed if I spent all that time tying 12 segmented bodies for a 12-inch fly when I could do 2 bunny leeches, use some lead wire to kind of, you know, put those together. And I have, you know, to me, I have something that's similar to what a Game Changer can do, or a Sex Dungeon, or any of these other flies. And don't get me wrong, those flies work. They're phenomenal, but I don't have a super long time to tie flies. You know, if I'm getting ready for a quick trip, or if I just want to fill my box, and I don't want to feel like I have to go after a fly that I'm snagged up on a log or anything like that in the middle of a river or lake, these don't hurt my feelings as much as those would. So for you guys tying along, well, I'll be using a size 6 Diachi 1750 hook. It's a 3X long streamer hook with a medium cone head. Again, you could tie these in any size you want. You know, you just want to make sure that you're matching everything. If you do decide to go with the chain, with the chain eyes or dumbbell eyes, you know, you want to, you know, just remember that your hook will fish upside down if you put it on top. So if you do, and you want to use it like more like a minnow pattern, you may want to just flip the hook first, get those eyes tied in. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and get our base going. You want to get a pretty good thread base going down. You know, again, because there are different ways of doing this. The way I knew I wasn't hit my camera. The way I like to do it is I like to measure, you know, about a hook, shank, and a half worth of tail. So we're going to have our shank there, and then half of that a tail. So there's 2 ways you can do this. What I like to do is I like to tie it into the back to secure the back. That removes that excess of that zonker strip flopping around way too much. Now, you technically can make this as long as you want. The problem with that is that on your false casts or back cast or anything like that, even stripping it in, you're going to have so much of that excess hanging off that you'll end up false hooking yourself. Happens all the time. Think you got a fish, set the hook, you're false hooked. So that's why I try to use that shank and a half of tail. I'll still get false hooked a little bit, but not nearly as bad. Now, as you can see, the zonker strip, all the hair is folding over the back side of it. That's what I meant by that straight cut. So what you'll want to do, so you keep as much fiber out as possible. Wherever you want to tie it in at, you want to, either use a bobkin, you can use your scissors, not to cut it, but just to pull that hair up a little bit. So you're giving yourself a nice clean spot to throw a couple thread wraps right there, just to hold that down. Now, if you're using a magnum strip, like I am, because of course that's all I had, the hide portion of it's going to be a little bit thicker than just a normal straight cut. So what you want to do is you want to make sure that it wraps around the hook shank evenly on both sides to try to keep the fly as, I guess, aerodynamic or water dynamic as possible. You don't want it to ride one way or the other. Let me throw one more in there. Okay. And then I'm going to take all that loose stuff. I'm going to leave it because what I want to do is I actually want all of this right here to be on the top portion of it, but I want to add some body. So I'm going to flip it back over this way, get it out of the way over here. And then I'm going to throw a couple of wraps right there in the front to lock it in. So now this is where you immediately have the ability to decide what you want this fly to look like. Body could be anything, like I mentioned. I'm going to just do what color is this? A pearl brown chenille right here. But like I said, you could use the yarn, you can use peacock curl, you could use regular chenille. This guy right here that I tied before in the past, I use this super thick Estes Grande stuff. It is amazing for big flies, comes in multiple different colors. And for a chenille, it is Grande, hence the name. So get a little bit of chenille started over here. And then work your thread up to the top. And then I'm just gonna wrap the body. Now, because I have the magnum cut, my hide of the actual rabbit will kind of pinch around the shank a decent amount. So I'm not going to go as bulky on this. Sorry, guys. I'm not going to go as bulky on this. I'm also going to try to get skinny on my wraps here so I don't keep hitting my camera. Now you want to leave yourself a little bit of room behind the cone head because we are going to add a collar or a neck or however you want to describe it. So I'm just going to go ahead and cut that off. When I fold this over, just like we did in the back, we want to make sure that we have this hide fold over the top of that. Because when this is all done, the body is usually only seen from underneath. Because with this fiber and everything over the top of it, plus once we add that neck, that collar, it'll be hard to see it. So just like we did in the back, I'm going to separate the hair forward. Give yourself some clean room to really get that locked in. Whenever I'm tying anything bulky like this behind a cone head, and you should be able to see, let me get this back in focus here. What I try to do is as I pick this up and hold this hair out of the way, I also try to pinch It's hard to see because my fingers are big, but I try to pinch my cone head up a little bit to kind of pick that up so it's not resting right on it. So when I cut it, the tip of this will actually fold into the cone head. So I got a couple reps there. I'm gonna fold it back over. Now you can see how that cone head is upright instead of laying flat down. It's kind of up a little bit. Throw a couple reps in there. Lock that in. And when I cut this, I don't want to lose any of that fur I got going on, any of that rabbit hair that I've already tied in here in the back. I'm going to separate it and try to cut right on that hide. I don't know if you can see, but I have right here is a piece of hide that's sticking up. All I'm going to do is pick up that cone head and allow that hide to fold in there. So now you could actually tie this off and go out and fish this fly and catch fish on it. There's nothing wrong with what this is right here. This would catch fish. It would fish really well, super easy. It would sink, it would jig, it would do whatever you wanted it to do. What I'm going to do though is I'm going to add a little bit of off color and add a collar. And what I'm going to use for that is a crosscut section of rabbit strip. Now, I know most of you guys have used crosscuts. I know most of you know what crosscuts are, but for those that don't, crosscut is another way of cutting the rabbit hide. I had this before. These are just zonker strips of rabbit fur cut down the back like this, shredded, so the hair folds over the back like this. Crosscuts are cut this way on the fur. So when you have a strip of crosscut and you hold it, the hair is going straight down. Hold this way. So you can see. This is great material to use whenever you're gonna palmer something, wrap something like a hackle. You know, you don't have to keep pulling it over itself because it already is in that format. But what you'll want to do, because you do have hide action on here, is you want to make sure that you try to minimize how much you're actually tying onto the hook. So what I usually do is I will, just on the edge, I'll cut a little bit of that hair away, just so I have that hide right there to be able to pinch in there. Again, my cone head, a lot of movement, right? So I'm going to get this tied in directly where I tied this piece of bunny strip on, just give it a couple wraps, and hopefully that hide will fill in that space that this will not be moving. That's the goal. So get that hide. Couple wraps. Make sure that's secured. And I'm just going to fold it over itself. Again, you have this cone to work with. So each time I wrap it, all I'm doing is making sure that I'm not exceeding the cone. I want to make sure that this can still fit into the cone. I'm going to come up one more time to right here. And just like how we finish everything, do a couple over the hand wraps here. Do a couple in front. Now this, when you cut it on this regular size, remember we tried to move the fur out of the way this way to give it a cut that way. What we want to do with this is we just want to cut it straight down the hide because you already have the fur going perpendicular with the hair, with the hide itself. So once we cut that off, there's always a little bit of hide that's hanging out. Just give it a couple more wraps. We try. I don't know, on your side, I think your guys are good. I have a little bit of hide sticking out over here, so I'm gonna try to capture that. Try to get that hide in a little bit more. Another nice thing about rabbit is that it's so durable that you can crank down on the thread and not have to really worry about ripping through the hide and having to start your fly all over again. But however you guys finish your flies, whip finish, half hitch tool, whatever you guys use. You fancy guys that could use your fingers super fast, go ahead and finish it off. You could give that a cut. Just enough room on it that this spins a little bit, not that that matters, but it's not moving, it's not jingling around at all, which is important. You know, you have that nice collar. I mean, all of this, I mean, you can see it even just with blowing on it, all that will move. You know, you jig this thing, it will stop, this tail will fold over itself. With these magnum strips, you have real nice length on the rabbit strip itself. And then with these collars, you know, I use, you know, cross-cut rabbit strips for a lot of things, probably that I shouldn't use it for, but just because of the way that that works. I know like big musky patterns, guys will use hackle and stuff in the front. I'll actually throw a little bit of a cross-cut rabbit strip in the front of a musky pattern because it's not as, it won't flare out as much as a hackle will, but because of the hide, it'll give it a little bit more weight in the front once that hide soaks up water. And even these little fibers right here kind of flaring up is almost like a gill flare up when you're throwing something that looks like a bluegill. Highly recommend using crosscut rabbit strips for various things. Obviously for bunny leeches, things like this. You know, obviously it looks good, easy to cut, and it makes it all rabbit. You know, you could actually use to technically make it all rabbit is you could actually use for the body itself, you could actually use rabbit dubbing. You know, you doing a size 6, you know, I hate dubbing, so I try not to use it unless I have to. And having to wrap a size 6 hook of a bunch of body material and having to keep licking my fingers and getting rabbit hair in my mouth, I figured go with the chenille and stuff like that. You know, from here, before I cut my hook off, if you wanted to, you could have added legs, give a little bit more movement. You could add flash to it, but I wanted to really show you guys the basic bunny leech and all the things that you could do with it, the different material, kind of go over the cross cut and stuff like that. So does anybody have any questions?
Do you ever tie it with a monofilament loop at the back of the hook to support the bunny strip?
I do when I tie the bigger ones, because I you know, if I'm tying them for pike and things like that, I'll extend this out a little bit further. So I have done that. I've actually had times though that I've actually had a pike hit it and actually rip the filament. And then almost every other cast, of course, I was false casting and wrapping my tail around it. So I do want to figure out something better to do, whether it's like just one, you know, real stiff piece that's back there, that's laying like perfectly straight. I don't know how much that would really work. But yes, I have used that before. These smaller ones, you'll still catch them every once in a while, but for the most part, they'll lay flat in the back. You really won't false hook them all that much.
And one last question, have you ever tied those with, like, say, squirrel strips instead of rabbit?
I have not used squirrel yet. From what I know of squirrel, though, I do know that it's kind of similar. Isn't it a little stiffer than rabbit?
Hair is a little shorter,
Shorter.
but you know, it's got a hide. It's very durable and would be good for smaller size flies.
Lost me, guys.